So maybe you're thinking to yourself, I'm interested in buying a rooftop tent, but I'm not 100% sure whether a rooftop tent is for me. Or you might be thinking to yourself, I definitely want a rooftop tent, but I'm not sure whether a Tentbox tent is the tent for me. Or you might be thinking to yourself, I definitely want a rooftop tent, I definitely want a Tentbox tent, but I'm not 100% sure whether the Tentbox Cargo is the tent for me. Well, I'm not going to be able to give you answers to all the questions you've got, but I certainly will give you my open, honest opinion about how this tent has been for me. So this is my 10-month review of the Tentbox Cargo. Well, it wouldn't be a camping review video in 2021 without some stunning drone footage to kick things off, as well as a little dramatic Lethal Weapon style music. But this is 2021, and this is now our 10th month of owning our Tentbox Cargo. Last year, I made an initial review video of our Tentbox, and in that video, I discussed why we chose the Tentbox Cargo, and also gave some initial thoughts on the Tentbox itself, as well as showcasing some more details about the cargo. If you haven't seen that video already, it's well worth checking out. But now we're 10 months on, and this tent has taken us on some amazing adventures since last June. We've camped in forests, roasted marshmallows by a lake, dozed off to golden sunsets, and woken up to the sound of waves crashing by the beach. This tent has given us some amazing experiences so far, and I felt it was time to update my initial review with some real-world knowledge, along with answers to questions that I simply did not know last year. I hope you enjoy, and thanks for watching. Now, before I go any further with this video, I just wanted to let you know that if after watching this video, you decide that you definitely want to get yourself a tent box and you're going to order one, then what I've done is I've put a special link in the description for this video below. Now, if you click that link, it'll take you through to the Tentbox website and you'll be able to claim a free exclusive gift from Tentbox worth £95. And what that's going to do is it's going to give you an awesome gift to go with your awesome new tent. So be sure to definitely click the link below when you order your tent and grab your free gift from Tentbox. So one of the first things I wanted to cover today was one of the questions that I see asked the most in the Tentbox community Facebook group, and it's just surrounding how the Tentbox is installed on top of the vehicle and how that affects things like wind drag, miles per gallon, and also sort of stability and things like that. Now, you'll notice on the screen the footage that you're seeing is from the initial Tentbox review video that I did last year, and as you can see, we've made a modification to the pickup truck since, which is the installation of the rear cab on the back. Now, originally last year we didn't have the rear cab, so it was just the shutter. And as you can see from the footage, essentially what that did is it meant that there was quite a significant amount of overhang on the front and the rear of the Tentbox, because the nature of the pickup cab is that it's quite small and narrow. So what that meant is that we were getting quite a lot of issues with regards to wind drag, and obviously that affected miles per gallon for performance on the motorways. Essentially anything over about 60-70 mile an hour, we really felt the truck fighting against the wind. So after 2 or 3 weeks, it was always my intention to move the Tentbox further back and obviously try and help with that issue with regards to wind drag. How it was installed originally meant that when we were up in the Tentbox and moving around, it was stable and there wasn't really any movement, but you just did hear a little bit of creaking every now and again, whereas now it's completely secure. We've essentially got the Tentbox Cargo is attached with the 2 bars on the main cab, and then on the back it's simply just resting on another bar. It's not attached because you're not supposed to attach on a pickup truck on both the main cab and the rear cab because they move differently. But what that's done is it's increased stability. It just made that when we're up there in the tent and moving around, there's no movement whatsoever. It means we've no longer got any wind drag on the motorways, and it means that miles per gallon performance is significantly improved. Now we've moved that back. Now, I appreciate not everybody's going to have a pickup truck, but what this means is that if you're looking to put a Tentbox on your own vehicle, it can give you a bit more of an idea as to sort of what Tentbox you should go for what kind of vehicle that you've got. So if you've got something like small, like a Volkswagen Polo or a Fiat 500, I wouldn't recommend getting something like a Classic or a Cargo, because there's just a significant amount of overhang, which is going to lead to things like wind drag. I'm not saying you can't, I'm just saying based on our experience, it might not necessarily be a good idea, because for us, we had our roof bars are quite close together. We didn't have the option to move them further apart, but on most cars, you could put your roof bars slightly further apart and it would provide more stability with the tent box on top. So like I said, anything small like a Volkswagen Polo or a Fiat 500, maybe something like a Tentbox Lite would be better for you. But if you've got a bigger car, you know, sort of Qashqai or something like that, you're going to have no issues with a Classic or a Cargo on top. And especially if you've got something like a van or a Land Rover or something significant, pickup truck, you're going to have no issues whatsoever. Now, there's two different ways that you can travel with this tent, and the beauty of this tent is that you can go and have the full camping experience. You can make it as faffy as you want to, you can have as much stuff as you want to, or if you just want to turn up somewhere, pop the tent up and just keep it nice and simple, you can do that. We did a really nice night up in a place called St. Abbs last year. It was just the tent. We woke up the next morning with the sea right next to us and the waves just doing their thing. It was beautiful, it was lovely. Equally, I did a sort of trip to Druridge Bay last year where we had the full setup, the privacy tent, the awning, the festoon lights, everything. But you can have both of those experiences and you can make it as complicated or as minimalistic as you want to, and that's the beauty of this tent. Everything, the awning and the privacy tent is just attached to the Tentbox Cargo, which is one of the reasons that I love the Cargo. With something like the Classic, it doesn't have the ability to attach things directly to the tent. So generally, if you were getting an awning, you would attach it to the roof bars with it around your car. Whereas with the Cargo, you can get the Cargo brackets and you can easily within a few minutes just have everything attached directly to the side of the Cargo. It really is convenient. It's one of the reasons why I specifically bought the Tentbox Cargo last year, for that ease, and I'm happy to report that that has come to fruition and I still feel very much happy with my decision for doing that. So another couple of questions that we've been asked a lot over the last 10 months is just with regards to how much room there is inside of the tent. And the two questions tend to be, how much storage space is there and how many people can sleep inside the tent? So I just wanted to kind of cover that now very briefly. Now, with regards to storage inside of the tent, Tentbox have decided to put a few different options in there for you. The main option that we tend to use is the Cargo netting that hangs from the main clamshell ceiling. What we tend to do is when we get up there at night, we'll sort of take our jackets off and things like that, and we'll shove them up inside the Cargo net. And it just means that things aren't just lying around you, it's sort of around your sleeping bags, everything's up and sort of out the way. Now, what Tentbox have also done is either side at the front, sort of, I class this as the front end of the tent. What they've done is they've put a couple of pockets either side, decent sized pockets that you can put things like your mobile phones and your car keys and various different things in there with you. Just again, to free up the space so it's not all kind of crowded around you. You're not waking up in the morning thinking to yourself, oh, where's my mobile phone and all that kind of stuff. You can put them in the pockets and everything's just up and out the way. Now, surrounding that, there is a lot of room in the Tentbox, particularly if it's just a couple of adults like it is with me and my wife. What we tend to do is we've got the Tentbox power station, so we'll take that up there with us at night. We can both plug our phones in and charge our phones, or when we're watching a film on the iPad, we can sort of plug that in and keep it charged. And there's enough room in there for that around your sleeping bags and things like that, and they don't particularly get in the way, and I certainly never feel like I'm kicking them. You know, if I put them down at the bottom end, I never sort of wake up kicking them in the middle of the night. There is plenty of room in the tent. So storage isn't a problem up there, but again, you can't take everything in the world up there with you, but just to have a few bits and bobs that you need for a night, you know, a drink and things like that, everything, there's plenty of storage space for that. Now, the next question I'm asked a lot on Instagram is with regards to how many people can sleep inside of the tent. Now, Tentbox officially say that with the Tentbox Cargo and the Tentbox Classic, you can fit 2 adults easily inside of the tent, whereas the Tentbox Lite can sleep up to 3 adults. Now, based on personal experience, even though it's only ever been myself and my wife that have been sleeping in the tent, I would say, given the amount of extra room that we've got up there, you could comfortably fit either a small child or a slightly larger dog or a couple of small dogs in there with you. I know that a lot of people either have like small families with a small child, or a lot of people like to take the dogs away traveling with them, and a lot of people want to know if they can get the dogs up there with them. Provided you can get your dog up into the tent and figure out a way to do that, then there is absolutely plenty of room for you and your dogs and your small family up there, no problem. So another question that I've been asked a lot over the last 10 months is how comfortable is the mattress inside of the Tentbox Cargo? And I'm pleased to say that it is a very comfortable mattress. I've had no problems sleeping in the Tentbox at all so far. And I imagine that the Tentbox Classic and the Tentbox Lite mattresses are going to be very, very similar. So I'll probably say in all 3 models of tents, you're probably going to have a really comfortable sort of mattress. I can't say this is going to be comfortable for everybody because I guess everybody's got different wants and needs from a mattress. All I can say is from somebody who's had lower back problems in the past, who needs a comfortable mattress at home, who needs to be constantly careful about the back, I've had no issues whatsoever with the mattress inside this tent. Now, when I made my initial review video last year of the Tentbox Cargo, I made references to why I particularly picked the Cargo tent over the Classic. And for me, one of the main reasons was to have the additional height in terms of headroom inside. Now, I'll go into more detail in that review video, so you can definitely check that out later. But one of the benefits I found as being 6'3", I found having the extra height that you gain in the Tentbox Cargo, given the nature of the clamshell, it was going to be a big benefit for me being so tall. It would allow me to potentially move around in the middle of the night. If I got up into the tent and needed to sort of kneel up to get my jacket off and put a t-shirt on or off, or I had that extra room and height and didn't need to worry about constantly being kind of crunched into the tent. Whereas with the Tentbox Classic, I was worried that that would be the case. Now, obviously, I can't speak for the Classic, but what I can say is with regards to that and the height that you've got in the Cargo, having been in it for the last 10 months, I can absolutely say that I am so glad I picked the Cargo. As someone who's 6'3", and to have that extra height, it makes a big difference. I think the height of the Tentbox Cargo inside is like 1.8 meters, whereas the Tentbox Classic is a meter, so it's significantly less. And the fact that you can just sit up in there and not have to worry about being hunched over. My wife doesn't have a problem, she's 5'4", but with myself and being a lot bigger, I just found that the extra room would make a big difference, and it really, really does. One of the biggest questions we've been asked over the last 10 months is how the tent holds up in the weather. And one of the reasons I wanted to make this video 10 months on from actually buying the tent is because we have used the tent, and we've used it in every single weather condition apart from snow. We've used it in every weather condition that we've had to offer. I'm actually able to give you honest, genuine feedback about how the tent holds up. Now, the second night we did, I think it was July last year, myself and my wife slept in the tent, and it was a thunderstorm night. It tanked it down with rain. The rain was bouncing off the road, was bouncing off the tent, bouncing off the truck, but we just slept like logs all night. It was just so cozy inside the tent, even with the rain bouncing outside. I mean, I'm the sort of person who loves falling asleep with my headphones on, listening to rainfall anyway. But, you know, to lie there in the tent and just be all snug in your sleeping bag, have the fairy lights on, it was just nice and cozy, and you could just hear the rain bouncing outside, but it was just lovely. And in terms of the tent itself, the tent held up absolutely fine. You know, we woke up next morning, the rain had stopped, we give it a bit of a bang off, sort of the sides, you know, we just patted out the fabric just to get some of the water off there. We closed the tent up, drove home, and then you know, the day afterwards the weather was nice and we just aired the tent out. Same as you would any other tent really, but the tent held up really, really well. I think it was the 4th or 5th night we did. I did a night up on the Northumberland coast right next to the beach, and I got caught out in the heavy wind. And by mistake, it wasn't my fault as such, but I kind of parked with the back of the truck towards the sea, and the wind all came in from the sea. So essentially the wind was battering the back of the tent. Whereas if I'd parked the other way, the wind would have just gone up and over the Tentbox Cargo. And that's one of the reasons why I like the Cargo over the Classic, is because of the clamshell nature of the Cargo. If you park it correctly with the wind, then the wind will just go up and over the tent, whereas on the Classic, with it being a box, you are going to get that impact from the wind at both one end. Does that make sense? So while I did get caught out that night with the wind, other nights when it's been windy, we've not had an issue because we've parked it correctly, sort of into the wind. Now, yeah, okay, it was windy, I was getting battered, the fabric was getting battered. What made it worse that night is I'd forgot my pillow and I'd forgot my headphones as well, so I could hear the wind all night and I wasn't particularly comfortable. But in terms of the tent standing up, you know, anybody who's been camping in a traditional set tent when it's really windy, you know, all your tent poles are bending and your tent's blowing over, nothing like that whatsoever with this tent. It was sturdy, it held up, and like I said, the fabric was flapping around, but if that's all it was, and I woke up the next morning and everything was just as it was the night before and everything was perfect, nothing was damaged. So in short, it really holds up well in the wind. Now, with regards to the condensation, a lot of people asking how bad it is with condensation and things like that. Ultimately, it's very similar to many other tents out there. You're going to get condensation in the morning. Now, how that affects things is one of the modifications we've made to this tent is we've installed a anti-condensation mat underneath the mattress. I think it was about £50 from Amazon, and it just comes in a roll, and we just cut it to sort of to size, you know, underneath the mattress. But it basically means we've got no issues anymore with regards to water collecting on the mattress, because the way it kind of works is the mattress sits on the metal sort of base floor of the tent box. So obviously when there's condensation underneath, it means that your mattress is going to get wet. But by using the anti-condensation mat, it's just kind of like a white mesh, and it just lifts the mattress up off the metal floor. And it just means, yeah, okay, you still need to air out your mattress as soon as you can after a trip, but it just means that your mattress isn't soaking wet through with condensation, and that the anti-condensation mat, for the sake of £50, essentially just solves that problem. So that's been one of the big pluses and modifications we've made to the tent since we've got it. Now, another question I see a lot is how the tent boxes hold up in the cold. The short answer, based on our experience, is it's the same as every other tent. If it's cold outside, it's going to be nippy in the tent. So what do you do about that? Well, we invested in some good sleeping bags. The general feedback from everybody is to invest in a good sleeping bag, the same as you would do in any other tent. What we tend to do is we always take the hot water bottles with us. We've got a couple of hot water bottles, and you know, we will, if we're on a campsite, we'll use the facilities on site to fill up the hot water bottle. If we're out in the middle of nowhere, we've got a gas cooker, we'll try and do a couple of kettles of hot water and warm up the hot water bottles that way. But a good sleeping bag, you know, a hot water bottle in there as well, it makes it really, really cozy. Some people, the really hardcore rooftop tent guys, invest in like diesel heaters and things like that. We're just not interested in doing that. We've just gone with a good sleeping bag, hot water bottle. If it's really cold, get some long johns on and some thermals. The same as any other camping experience, really. So that's the short answer to the question. How does it hold up in the cold? Same as every other tent. Good sleeping bag, hot water bottle, thermals if you need them, and just enjoy the experience for what it is. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is probably the question that is asked the most, whether it's in the Tentbox group on Facebook, whether it's our Instagram, or whether it's our YouTube channel. And that is, how does the tent hold up with the midges? Now, everybody who's been camping before has probably come across midges. They are a pain in the backside, and depending on where you are stopping, you've got different levels of midges. You've got Scottish midges, you've got Lake District midges, we've got Northumberland midges. Midges are a pain in the backside. So everyone wants to know how these tents hold up with the midges. Now, the short answer is basically the same as every other tent. In the sense that it comes with a fly net inside the door. You've got to try and do a quick escape by keeping the fly net shut as much as you possibly can. And you've got to take all the precautions you can to basically just try and keep the midges at bay. Whether it's bug spray, we normally have a fly zapper that we attach to the outside of the tent that kind of glows in the dark and generally zaps them. When we're sitting underneath the awning, we'll get the citronella candles out and do all that kind of stuff. Basically, we'll do everything we can, just as you would do normally, to keep the midges out. But with the fly net closed and everything sort of protected inside the tent does do a very good job of keeping the midges out. But like you say, as soon as you open the door, the midges come in, and it's the same as every other tent and every other camping experience, basically. But I just wanted to cover that because people always ask us. So I touched upon it a little bit before when I was talking about the different weather conditions that we've sort of slept in, but a lot of people ask us, what's the Tentbox Cargo like in terms of robustness and sturdiness? Is it a solid tent? Does it feel solid? Now, I made reference in the initial review video that I did last year, where my initial thoughts on the tent were that it was very sturdy. It felt like a good quality tent. Not only was it made out of an aluminium frame, but the fabric was good fabric, the stitching felt sort of good, everything felt good quality. And I'm pleased to say that 10 months on, I've had no issues with the tent whatsoever in terms of the build quality or anything failing on the tent. I've not had any replacement parts, I've not had to swap anything out for anything else. It's held together really, really well. Now, I'm making this sort of video in April of 2021, and I made the last video in June 2020. So I've had a summer, an autumn, and I've had it stored for the winter. We've generally keep the sort of tent on our truck full time, kept in place by all the security devices that we have installed. And a lot of people have asked us how it's held up during the winter. And again, I mean, we had it closed for about a period of 2 months, solid. I've tried to open it up once the weather got better to let it air out and give it a bit of a clean. One thing that I've learned, and one thing that I will pass on as a nice sort of bit of a learning experience, is that when I opened the tent up in February, so a couple of months ago now, it had been closed for probably, like I say, about two and a half months, give or take. And there was a little bit of mold inside, like very, very, very light amount of mold, certainly nothing heavy. And I went and spent like an afternoon washing everything down and cleaning everything with sort of soap and water. That did seem to do the job, and I'm probably going to give it another go over, you know, in a few weeks' time, just before we start camping on it properly. What I'm probably going to do next year when I store it for winter is get a bunch of those little silicone sachet things that absorb moisture, and probably before I close it up for the winter, I'm probably going to get a bunch of them, just lay them all on the mattress inside, close the tent up, and I'm hopeful that they'll help with regards to that molding problem. It wasn't anything significant, everything just wiped off instantly, but just to try and help sort of prevent that next time, like I say, I'll get a bunch of them silicone packets, see how that goes. I'm not going to guarantee that that's going to work, I don't know, but I figured we'll give it a go next year and see if that makes any difference. But in short, having had the tent stored for winter and it being on the truck full time, it's opened up and it's still in pretty much exactly the same condition as it was before. So another thing that I wanted to talk about very briefly is a little modification we've made to the tent, and we've added on the side of the tent rails some eye bolts. Now, eye bolts, as you can see in the video here, are these little circular bolts that attach to the side, and what that allows you to do is it provides you with a very inexpensive way of attaching various different things to the side of your tent. So that could be a case of if you want to attach a tarp to the side of your tent, or if you wanted to attach a hammock with one end attached to the tent and another end attached to a tree or something like that. Their weight would be supported with the eye bolts, but what it does is it provides you with a really inexpensive solution for attaching things to your tent. Now, I wanted to mention, because it's very important, that Tentbox haven't paid me to make this video. In fact, they have no idea that I'm making this video, just like they had no idea that I was making the last video. This is very much an independent review from somebody who just loves their Tentbox. But what I also like doing is providing people with information and helping people. And if you watching this video are thinking about buying this tent and you're wondering to yourself, is it for you? I want to make sure that you've got as much information as possible to make an informed decision. At the same time, as part of that being an independent review video, I wanted to mention any potential negatives that I found with the tent, because it's important for me to cover both sides of things. Now, given what I've just said, I actually have really struggled to find any negatives with this tent. I do love the tent, and I'm honest about that. I am not a Tentbox fanboy or anything like that. I just love the tent for the experiences that it has offered us and will offer us in the future. But at the same time, this is an independent review, and in the spirit of balancing the scales, I wanted to try and think of a few things that I've found over the last 10 months that would be of benefit to know, that would be classed more negative than positive. So I'm going to talk about them now. So the first one I wanted to mention is just with regards to the size of this tent. Now, often the size of the tent when it's on the vehicle closed up tends to throw people a little bit, because a lot of people see it and they're like, whoa, that's big. But in truth, the tent is as big as it needs to be. It needs to be big enough to sleep one person lying down full length. It also needs to be big enough and wide enough to fit two people sleeping side by side, plus a dog or two. So it needs to be as big as it needs to be. But a lot of people initially see it and they're like, whoa, that's a lot bigger than what I thought it was going to be. Yet at the same time, once I've opened it up and set everything up for them, a lot of people are like, wow, that's actually amazing. So that initial reaction of, whoa, that's big, turns into, wow, that's amazing. But I wanted to mention that it is a little bit bigger than probably what you were thinking it's going to look like. So be very, very mindful when you're ordering your tent and when you're choosing the model of tent box that you're going to order as to how big it's going to look on your vehicle. Get the tape measure out, have a bit of a measure out. But ultimately, you're going to have to make that decision and be prepared that when it arrives, it's going to probably be a little bit bigger initially than what you thought it was going to be. However, once you've got it up and once you start using it, you won't care about the size. Like I said, it's as big as it needs to be. Now, the second thing I wanted to mention is just with regards to closing the tent and how that's not necessarily always an easy task. Now, I made mention earlier about trying to sort of close the tent up with bedding inside and how I felt it was going to be highly unlikely that you're going to be able to store bedding inside the Tentbox Cargo, not to mention the ladders that it's nigh on impossible to close the tent with the ladders inside, so I found. So I would say, like I said earlier, that it's going to be very, very difficult to store things inside. However, there's been a couple of occasions where we've been trying to close this tent with nothing stored inside, and it's been a bit of a challenge to get it closed. We have managed it, but sometimes it's a two-person job instead of a one-person job. And I just wanted to make mention of that. Firstly, just to reiterate the fact that you're really not going to be able to store anything inside. But secondly, just to be prepared that it may well be a couple of you trying to get the locks on and things like that to try and get it closed up. It's not happened very often, but on the odd occasion, it has sort of relied on me calling over the wife just to give me a hand pushing the locks, and often it's involved me pushing down on the lid, my wife pushing the lock up, trying to get everything locked up and in place. Like I said, doesn't happen very often, but just something to be mindful of that will happen potentially every now and again. So the third thing I wanted to mention is just with regards to a little bit of rusting that I've found on some of the metal components. Now, rusting is to kind of be expected a little bit along the way. The bolts underneath that keep the tent box attached to the roof bars, they've got some rust on them. Some of the little bit of metal components around the sides have got like a little bit of rust on them, but I was actually quite surprised to find a little bit of rust on some of the metal components that were stored inside the tent. Again, it's not a major issue, and it's cleaned up, but just to be mindful of that when you're going to be storing your tent, if you're going to be keeping it on your vehicle full time like we do, just to be mindful that if you are going to close it up and keep it closed up for the winter, might be worth, like I mentioned earlier, just putting some of them little silicone gel sort of sachets inside just to help soak up some of that moisture. It may just help with regards to any potential rusting that might happen. Again, not a major issue, it's very minimal, but just something to be mindful of. But I would also say that that's not necessarily going to be linked just to the Cargo. That's probably going to be also the case for the Classic and the Tentbox Lite to some degree as well. And the fourth and final thing I wanted to mention, and I am well aware that I am really sort of scraping the barrel here for any negatives, because there aren't really any negatives with my experience so far, but all I would say is that our fairy lights didn't last very long. So when you order a tent box, a lot of people have got a free set of fairy lights inside. They're cheap and cheerful, they're nothing fancy. You're buying a tent, not fairy lights, so they are a nice little lovely free gift. Ours didn't last very long, we didn't have much luck with them. So yeah, okay, it would have been nicer if our fairy lights lasted a little bit longer. Is that a major issue? No. Did we go and buy some more fairy lights for a £5? Yes, it's not a major issue at all. And like I said, I am well aware that I am really scraping the barrel here trying to find negatives. So of the 4 negative things that I've kind of said, they're not major issues in any way, shape or form, and certainly when I talk to people about my experience with our tent box, I never mention any of those things because they are very, 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 very insignificant to me. My overall experience with the tent box has been ridiculously positive. I am very positive and openly positive about having the tent box and my experience with the tent box, using the tent box and how we found it. So don't let any of those 4 negatives that I've mentioned really cloud your judgment, because they're not major issues at all. So one of the final things I just wanted to mention is just how cool this tent is. It looks fantastic on top of the truck, but the number of comments it receives when we're out and about, whether it's closed up, even just closed up in the supermarket and car park, and people just want to like, hey, what's that on there? People are just curious as to what it is. But when it's open and you're on a campsite and surrounded by motorhomes and caravans and camper vans, and people are coming over to you just talking about it and asking you questions. I mean, it's lovely to get all the compliments because it is a lovely tent and it's fantastic, but it's just great because it triggers conversations that people are genuinely interested in what it's about. But the other thing, and putting all that to one side, is just from your point of view and the experiences that we've had in it, whether it's waking up in a new location every day, just the cool nature of it being on top of the truck, but also the experiences that it offers you when it's on top of the truck and the things you can do and the places you can go. Honestly, it's just fantastic. And I wanted to just say that because that's my honest, genuine opinion. If you got one of these tents, you would never regret what it's going to be able to do and give you in your life from an adventure point of view. So I guess ultimately the main question we all want to know is, do I still love the Tentbox Cargo 10 months on? And the short answer is Yes, absolutely. Now, if you've not seen the initial review video I made last year, definitely go away and watch that after watching this video, because in that video I talk a lot about my reasons for buying the tent in the first place and why we felt at the time that it was going to be something that could give us a different type of adventure that was missing in our lives. And I'm pleased to say that 10 months on, that has absolutely been the case. You know, I also mentioned that my wife was a reluctant camper last year, and now she loves this tent to a point where she was even suggesting to us last year, like, oh, should we go away for a night? I did not expect that to be the case at all. But I think the great thing about this tent, and I mentioned earlier, is that if you want to, you can just keep it nice and simple. You can just pop the tent up somewhere and just sleep very minimalistic just with the tent. And when we did the night in the harbour, everything was just perfect. The sunset, the waves just next to you, meters away. We had the fairy lights on, watching a film on the iPad. It was just perfect, all cuddled up together. It was fantastic. And then at the same time, we've stayed on campsites. We've had the whole awning out, all the festoon lights, the fire pits, everything. You know, you can have one extreme or you can have the other. But that's the beauty of this, is that you can make it into whatever you want to be. And we've had some fantastic trips and some fantastic nights away within the United Kingdom over the last 10 months. But I honestly cannot wait for the day that we can take this down into Europe, and the day that I can wake up, unzip the tent, and I've got the Swiss Alps or the French Alps or the Mediterranean just next to us. I honestly can't wait for those adventures in the years to come. But I can honestly say that I do love this tent. It was worth every penny. It's probably one of the best investments we've ever made, and I am so looking forward to what it's going to be able to bring us in the future. Well, there we go, my 10-month review of the Tentbox Cargo. I appreciate there was a lot to take in, but if you're looking at buying one of these amazing tents, I felt it was important to give you every bit of knowledge I had to offer. I know I've said it already, but the adventures and experiences we've enjoyed so far in this tent have been everything that I'd hoped for. The freedom on offer and the where shall we go next style travelling is entirely there for the taking with this tent. If you long for adventure and you fancy your next road trip, this is absolutely the way to do it. It's camping without the faff of camping, and whether you're out in the wild or overnighting in a car park by the beach, it really is simply a case of rocking up and popping up. We've loved every minute of it, and I know you'll love it too. Go on, treat yourself now and enjoy some amazing adventures for years to come.